Come, child, it's time for a story.
Story about what?
A story about the past. Think I'll call it Just One Wish. I've often heard your people say that there are infinite possibilities, but I don't think they realize how true that was. Because there are infinite possibilities, and because there are infinite possibilities, anything can happen. And one day, it did. A long, long time ago, the land where we now live was a very different place. There were kings and emperors, treaties and alliances, tyranny, war, famine, and disease. Lies were told so often that they were believed to be truth. This made it so that when truth was spoken, it sounded conspiratorial.
What does conspiratorial mean?
It's a word used to make someone appear insane.
So they thought people who told the truth were crazy?
Yes, dear, they did. They also thought that faith and hope were irrational, while thinking it was rational to desire uniformity.
And what's that?
It means being the same.
The same as what?
Well, that's the thing no one could agree on. They desired perfection, but they couldn't agree on what perfect was. But then there was Sparrow. Sparrow was a sweet girl with a pure soul, and she lived in that harsh world. She was one of the few who had faith in goodness and hope for a bright future. Whatever that means.
It means being happy.
Whatever that means. Sparrow would often sit atop her roof where she would pray. Sometimes she would pray for the wisdom to make her world a better place. Sometimes she would pray for the knowledge on how to change her world entirely. But most often, she'd pray for someone to come save her. For our sweet Sparrow did not know what she really wanted. She only knew that she didn't like what she had, and she wanted something different. And the gods knew this, and it made them very angry.
We have given them lush gardens to feast upon, many beasts as well to utilize. We have supplied them with an abundance of material to build, to create, and to enjoy. Yet here they are, always asking for more, always creating problems, and then expecting us to solve them.
You see, dear, the gods are not parents, because they do not nurture. I can barely consider them artists, even though they do create. I think it would be more fair to call them children. You see, they create little worlds, and they play in them for a while, and then they leave. Now, child, imagine that you create an entire world, and you provide that world with everything it needs to survive on its own. And suddenly, one evening you hear one of your creations telling you that they have broken everything you created, and that it is now your job to fix it. What would you do?
Well, I'd give him a kick in the butt.
Yes, dear, you would. And now you understand why the gods did what they did.
Well, what did they do?
Well, just as Sparrow finished her prayers, she looked up to the sky and saw a glimmer of light, like the twinkle of a star. But this star was falling closer and closer to Earth, and closer to Sparrow. But Sparrow was not afraid, because in her heart she knew that this was a gift for her. So she stood her ground, and she waited for it to land. And it did land, just beyond the trees in the forest behind her home. Sparrow stood atop her roof for a moment, watching the bright light weave its way through the trees. And then she ran, straight into the woods and towards the light, until at last she found it, surrounded by trees and nestled into the earth. Sparrow, being the naturally nurturing type, couldn't help but to think of how much the sight reminded her of an egg in its nest. And so she whispered to it,
I'll be your mother.
She kneeled close so to better admire the object, and tried, though in vain, to memorize its shape. But it was not from that plane of reality, and so its shape could never be fully explained. Sparrow looked upon it once and saw an innumerable amount of interlacing circles, but then she blinked and saw only a 12-petal flower in the center of an oval. There were at once rectangles that changed into squares and then into diamonds. The object never appeared the same, and the more she observed it, the more entranced by it she became. Sparrow would swear that she could hear the object hum like a hive of bees. It was rhythmic and soothing, and before long, Sparrow was dancing, swaying side to side to its rhythm. Then the object seemed to open and release colors that rolled around and back into itself. Finally, Sparrow would feel the object as its pulsing rippled through her body in waves of increasing intensity, until she reached the point when she felt as though her body would snap in half and she could bear it no more. And then it all abruptly stopped, and everything fell silent. Now that Sparrow was released from her trance, she fell to the ground, and that's where she stayed, gripping the earth as though at any moment she would fly away. But eventually, her grip did soften, and when her constitution was regained, she brought herself to her knees, and once again, she felt drawn to the object. And when she looked at it, she witnessed something growing from its center. It appeared to be something like a man or a beast. This creature had long golden horns with blue-tinted skin, and from its back protruded silver thorns. Sparrow watched in awe as this majestic creature, that must surely have been a god, grew to its fullest extent. And when his eyes met hers, she quickly bowed her head before she spoke. "Dear Great One, I have prayed and prayed for many nights to be sent a savior. Please tell me you're the answer to my prayers." The creature, the one you and I know better as Hayel, smiled a toothy grin. A grin so wide that most anyone would have thought it sinister. But not Sparrow. Sparrow did not consider the smile, nor the malice behind it, for all that she considered were his next words.
Ask and you shall receive.
Of all the many times Sparrow sat atop her roof and prayed, she still had no idea how to ask for what she wanted. And so instead, she said the first thing that came to her. "I wish for world peace." Such a selfless request from such a selfless girl, directed towards such a self-serving creature. Hayel, seeing only opportunity, knew exactly what he was going to do, and in a show of grandeur, he clapped his hands with a thunderous boom. And once again, the world fell silent. Sparrow looked up into the face of Hayel and caught sight of the sky being filled with all of the colors of the rainbow, and she smiled, overjoyed by the spectacle. After all, how could such a beautiful array of colors be anything but a good omen? Sparrow rose to her feet, and with glee in her heart and a smile stretched across her face, she began to dance. And as she twirled in circles, with her arms stretched wide, the rainbow gases descended slowly to the earth, where they had begun to clog her lungs. Sparrow stopped dancing and grasped at her throat. It had become very, very dry, and it had begun to burn. She had finally become aware of what was happening, and she looked to her savior, asking him, Is this how the world will find peace?" Hayel, who had never stopped watching her, leaned over to touch her chin before replying,
Yes, young one. You shall now all rest in peace.
Sparrow died that night, choking on her fantasy. Now, child, tell me what it is you think of Hayel.
I don't know.
Do you think him kind?
No.
Do you think him cruel?
I think it's more complicated.
It's time for bed, little one.
Mama?
Naima. You call me Naima.
Oh, okay. Do you like Sparrow?
No, I don't like weak things. Now off to bed. And sweet dreams.